Hi, everybody. So today's topic is about borderline personality disorder. And recently in the comments, someone asked me to speak about it. And some of what the comment was that people that are diagnosed with borderline, sometimes they dissociate and switch emotional parts. And this person had heard therapists speak on borderline personality disorder, and sometimes due to their trauma, it could cause it a bit like CPTSD was the comment. So I'll give you my take on borderline personality disorder. I used to work in an addictions agency, and I became trained in DBT, dialectic behavior therapy. And at the time, we're talking late 90s, early 2000s, that was the go-to therapy modality for people with borderline personality disorder. And it was very helpful for people with addictions. So what DBT is basically, it's created by Marsha Linehan, and it's 4 modules of skill sets. And they're very helpful for regulating emotions, being more mindful. You've probably heard me talking about the sunflower skills. That is really a DBT skill, to be mindful and observing. All that being said, let me pause and go to the DSM-5. Okay, this, you can see mine is not very well used. This is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that everybody uses to diagnose people. Myself, being trained in EMDR, I learned a whole different way of understanding people's brains and how trauma shows up in our bodies and in our behavior and in our affects or emotions. So we're not throwing this away. We can't. But we're just seeing things from a different scope. And it's not just EMDR trained therapists that often have like a different perspective, as opposed to we're just looking at symptoms, we're just looking at, the symptoms and the disorder. So a few years ago, I've attended many of the psychotherapy networker conferences in DC, Washington, DC. And I got to hear people like Bessel van der Kolk, and he's the Body Keeps the Score guy, and Dan Siegel, he is a professor of psychiatry at UCLA. Richard Swartz, who invented internal family IFS systems. So hearing these big players in the psychiatric world, they were all pretty much on board, and I took notes from back then, and I found them for this video. And it was Dan Siegel that said in his presentation, every disorder in the DSM is coming from the disease model. It's a corrupt process. Not one diagnosis is met with scientific evidence except for PTSD, and that one is very heavily researched. And in fact, that is where EMDR research first started, was with PTSD. So he is a neurobiology guy, and he is saying this. So I don't want to get attacked for this, because that's what insurance companies run from, is this, and doctors and psychiatrists and psychotherapists and psychologists. This is our common language here. And yet, a lot of it is based subjectively and not looking at there's reasons why these symptoms are presenting, and it doesn't mean that it's like a disease. And borderline personality disorder, to me, falls under that. Because absolutely, person that asked the question originally Could it be caused from PTSD and complex PTSD, which is ongoing neglect and trauma and abuse in childhood? Absolutely. So I'm going to speak about that. So I'm cracking open the DSM, and right off the bat, the first criteria to meet borderline personality disorder is frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Changes, profound changes in self-image, affect, cognition, and behavior. This sounds like parts, doesn't it? And with internal family systems, those parts that were hurt or afraid of being hurt again, those very vulnerable parts, we are calling exiles. And IFS gives us a way to work with them, not saying, like in this broader sense, oh, you have a personality disorder, there's something wrong with you. No, this model is saying, there's an exile that's very activated. And then what happens next? Well, managers come stepping forward. They are often critics, they're the overthinkers, they're the judgers, they're even the parentified children that come running in and try to get control. And if that doesn't help, or with people with borderline, it goes right from exile to immediately those firefighter parts. And firefighters are impulsive and tend to be very reactive and can be self-harming or even harming of other people. So there we have firefighter parts. And that's one of the criteria too. Number 8, inappropriate, intense anger, difficulty controlling anger. And number 9, the last criteria, transient, stress-related paranoid ideation and severe dissociative symptoms. Number 6, recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, self-mutilating. All of these can be addressed with internal family systems and EMDR therapy. So with EMDR, the protocol is, why am I having this $100 reaction? And very quickly, like let's say it's that first criteria, all of a sudden I feel like I'm being abandoned. The protocol helps us go back in time, float back to when that original hurt happened. And then we can work with that part. We can, bilateral stimulation and the protocol of EMDR, we can help that part to release its burdens and integrate with current events and adaptive behaviors and adaptive information. Now, earlier I did a short little video outside, and I said integration is not the goal, meaning the parts aren't going to all go away and all of a sudden there's just this one person with no parts. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about integrating the traumatically stored information with adaptive, the good stuff, the stuff I didn't know as a kid that I know now. Like I have agency as an adult that I didn't have back then. So the borderline personality disorder, to me, again, it's a continuum. Just like dissociation is a continuum. To me, all of us, if we're honest, at one time or another, we could be acting like a borderline. Like, I know I've had real strong rage episodes back when I was younger, or feeling like I'm being all left alone, but I didn't have enough going on to be diagnosed. But there's parts of me, and through my work, understanding all this stuff I'm sharing with you, and having support and doing self-care and getting therapy and being trained in EMDR and having EMDR done to me, or I don't know how you would say it. I've done EMDR with myself too, with a therapist. Like all that stuff has helped those parts to calm down, or if they do get active, hey, we got other places we can go with that. So I don't want you to, I would love for you to not be so hung up on the diagnoses, and I'm seeing that in the comments with the OSDD and DID and all the stuff that's a disease model, and looking individually at, it's good to understand and to, oh, in black and white, okay, there's other people that experience this kind of stuff. Okay, great. And looking at these other types of more encompassing therapeutic interventions that are not shaming and not, what's wrong with you? Well, there is a reason. And so often it's because of trauma and not having a chance to feel safe and heard and ventral vagal, just connected. Hope this makes sense. And thanks again for tuning in, and keep the comments coming, and I'd love to hear from you.